So we're now at the planning stage. We have defined clear steps. We're working out how we want to measure. We're analyzing the scenario, the measurement. And the most important thing in change management, resistance. What is resistance in the context of an organization?
No to adapt. Deny to adapt.
Ready.
Sorry, you're saying?
Deny to adapt, or maybe not ready to adapt.
Not ready or deny.
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure, right?
Don't want to leave their comfort zone.
Right.
Job insecurity.
आने वाली मुश्किलात.
True.
Job insecurity.
Insecurity, bilkul. What else? So all of this covers resistance. And the biggest thing in resistance, how many of you seen the movie Moneyball? There's a scene in Moneyball, and if we had internet, I would love to show you that, but you could always go and look at it. Moneyball has a scene where I think it's, if I'm not wrong, Brad Pitt, and he's sitting with all these, and his role is a coach / recruiter for a baseball team. And he's got all these other scouts. And but they start off saying, what's our problem? Identification. What's our problem? And one quote says, we've lost 3 good people, we want to replace them. He's like, no. Somebody says, hey, you know what? We need this many home runs and this many knockouts and strikes. Like, no. And then finally he says that, there are A players, B players, there's 50 feet of shit, and then there's us. And then he goes to tell them a new strategy, which they don't accept, and which the movie is based on real events, right? So that movie is based on the actual events, which changed how baseball's recruitment worked. So the idea was, it's not the top best players that you want. You have to look at your specific problem that you're trying to address. All right, we don't have enough runs. We've not been able to get to the semifinal because of, let's say if we talk in cricket concept, we have bad fielding. If we have bad fielders, would it be better to train the fielders or get more better batsmen?
Train them.
Right. If we had an amazing batting line, would we still keep getting more batters or focus on the bowling?
Bowling.
So if you don't identify the problem properly, you will never get to the right solution. Then there's other people. I was doing it this way for 50 years. It's worked for me 50 years. Why should I change? Number one. Number two, I will not change. What do you do with resistance? Besides throwing them out, what do you do with resistance?
Try to counsel them.
Excellent. Counsel them. Communicate with them.
Tell the benefits of change.
Excellent. Tell them the benefits the change will bring. You agree? Wonderful. Anybody else?
Effectiveness, the after results.
The after results, the change, the effectiveness, great. And we'll talk about it later. We've all heard, since we were little kids, we've heard necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
We've all heard that. Have you all gone to universities?
Yes.
Have you seen that cute couple on the corner? Jo date marte hain? Ever wonder how they plan their day?
No.
How quick they are to know, इसके बाबा आ रहे हैं, इसका भाई आ रहा है, इसके ये आ रहा है, छापा पड़ रहा है, ये कर लो, वो कर लो. The point is necessity. If we as people realize the necessity of something, our brain is structured in a way where we will find a solution. Coming back to what was being said earlier, that is where the survival of the fittest comes. Our mind is wired to survive. But if we do not consider something to be important, it's like saying, as an example, I consider a certain task to be important, which means I will give it due attention. I will plan for it. I will try to look up the resources to get it done. Number two, I do not think that is important, but I have to do it. Now what? I'll waste a lot of time. The last moment that I'm there, then I'm like, how do I do this? Is there a manual that I can look up? Is there a friend who can answer 2 questions and I'll ace this test? or I'll do this task by asking somebody else. I have a few friends that I've spoken to in HR, for example. They got a task 6 months ago. They had other things, firefighting, this and that going on. They didn't focus on it. Right 1 week before the deadline, they'd call me up and say, "Ya kuch jugaad bata de. Give me a shortcut." Have you ever seen something like that? We all have. The point is, let's not undermine the power of our brain. Our brain has managed to keep us surviving for thousands of years. Even right now, I'll give you an example, and this is from my dad. He was a young kid and he remembers. Have you ever been to Samnabad?
Yes.
Okay. More Samnabad ke paas na, there's this nala hai wahan pe. Now it's all covered and stuff, but back in the days it wasn't covered. It was open. Do you have any idea how wide that is? Quite wide. So my dad got out of his house. He was walking on the street. And he's a young kid, let's say early teens. And suddenly this dog starts running behind him. And he starts running. And the dog is following him. And he starts running. And then when he gets right there to the corner, he jumps. He ends up on the other side, on his feet. And the dog's standing there staring, how did this happen? And to date, when my dad told this to his friends, they all came back and they all looked at it and they're like, it's not possible. It's just not possible. And that's how great our mind is at surviving. I'll give you another example, and I read this up more recently. And this is in relation to the weightlifting. Hardly 30 years ago, people used to believe that 500 pound was as much as a human being could pick. And please excuse me on the numbers, I could be bad on them, but the example is true. So people used to believe back then that, for instance, 500 pounds is the maximum a human being, a superhuman, can pick. Beyond that, the bones will break, person will die, they'll crush, etc., etc. All myths, perceptions. The Russians, the coach, as a joke, as a prank on one of the Olympic weightlifters, what they did was they added 2 pounds. They added 2 pounds as a prank, and they told him it's 500. And obviously he was competing for the maximum, so he would try to do that. And he picked it up. And when he picked it up, it freaked them out. And then they put 1 more. And he picked it up. That year, that person obviously made a world record. But in the following 5 years, 23 people broke that record, one after another. And each person broke the previous person's record. So all it took was for one person to break that perception. Right? We're all okay with that? And so with resistance, coming back to the point, we have to address resistance. We've all studied physics at some point, right?
Yes.
Friction, resistance, it's exactly the same. You want to go in this direction, resistance will try to take you back. Yeah, and you need to smoothen that, and we'll talk about it. Finally, evaluation. Evaluation of what we have identified. Data gathering. We did information. Now we're working on data, right?
Survey,
Sorry?
feedback survey.
Feedback, survey. And then there's a lot of sources of primary and secondary data that you'll find in any organization, right? So that was my question to everybody here. If you have conducted a training, how would you measure that it has had an impact? There was an answer which said we would look at change in behavior. Yes, that's one style. And what happens in that is, before the training, you would do a small assessment or a survey or a questionnaire, and then you would do one after the training. And you'd see if there's any difference. All right, that's one method. What was the other method? Change in behavior. Well, how do we measure that?
We would be observing that, definitely.
Normally, we wouldn't observe it. What we would do is talk to the peers, get peer feedback. People who work with the person, the manager and the subordinate, and we'll do sort of like a 360 and find out what has changed. Right. What if we wanted to measure that in the more immediate instance? See, when you talk about the human conscience, that's not tangible.
Exactly.
When somebody comes and says, hey, you did an amazing job,
That's
not tangible. I'm asking about tangible. And you know what the answer is? We have no answer. We have like 100 methods. And every company or every thought model that's presented has its own pros and cons. I'll give you an example. I did a training once, and what happened in the training was, towards the end of the training, they gave us all a piece of paper. And what they asked us to do was write down what you have learned today. And we were talking about, a lot of management changes, organizational changes, personal behavior changes because of targets and this and that. And we wrote that down. So the question was, when you go back to the office on Monday, what are you going to do? So I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, like, as an example, I'm going to come on time every day. I'm going to be very soft and nice to my team members.
Motivation course for oneself.
Action items, not motivational quotes, action items. What am I going to do with this training that I have received once I get back to the office? So all nice things. And as an example, again, actionable items. I will go back and be nice to my team. I'll not yell at them. I will go and be more practical. I will go and be more objective in terms of the things I do, blah, blah, blah. And then we folded them, put them in an envelope, and we addressed them to ourselves. And we handed them back to the trainer. And as is with all trainings, Monday we got back to work, firefighting, got busy, forgot about it after 10 days. Nothing. Then 2 months later, we all received the same letter in the mail that we addressed to ourselves. And when we opened it, honestly, we'd totally forgotten by then even what we wrote. Yeah, but when then we opened it, like, oh my God, I was supposed to do this and I didn't, right? So there are different methods of trying to make trainings more effective, but so far there's no formula that's conclusive, like, you do this, you ask this, boom, you've got a number. And different organizations use their own methods. So sometimes they use mixed, like in our organization, we use the survey method. We would normally do a survey before the training, after the training. Feedback, that's a separate survey. The feedback actually asks more generic questions, but it helps us. We would ask more about, was the trainer communicative? Was he able to deliver the concept? Was the surrounding good for you? Was the environment conducive? Yeah, did you learn something new? Was there something that we can add on? And that helps us. But again, this is not the single parameter that one would use. I would always think about using multiple parameters, such as if you're able to implement 360 within your company, amazing. But it's also not easy. And one of the biggest problems in Pakistan with 360, number one, lack of technology. Number two, lack of use of technology. Number three, people are like, why should I bother filling this out?
Just have to accept.
Yeah, so their acceptance is not there. And they're simply like, it's okay, I told that guy this training was good. Why do I need to fill it up again? And that kind of stuff, right? Then there's budgeting and funds. Anybody who's worked in corporate or not worked in corporate knows money is very, very important. So whenever you take on a challenge, a task, anything, you need to ensure you have the accurate budgets. As an example, and I'm going to use this later as well. How many of you use computers at work? Everybody? All right. How many of you use Apple MacBook Pros at work?
Not work personally.
Just one? What if I said that from 2 months from now, all of you are supposed to use Apple MacBooks?
Will the thing or
Budget.
something else changed?
Yeah, and if you would like to explain to everybody why I'm saying that, you've used both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
can use that.
could you share with everybody why?
It would be like more easy. This won't be more easy to use, but there would be something new, the technological things.
So can you tell them why is it different?
Because that has something very innovative as compared to other like.
I know you like, Apple, but the point I'm trying to get it to is, as an example, I'm sorry I'm taking this over.
No worries.
As an example, if you've used iPhone and Android. Samsung, The first problem people get is if they use, like I've recently shifted to iPhone.
How to use it?
Yeah, and the first problem is whenever I want to go back, my hand goes and presses down here, and there's nothing there. And then I have to go up and press a button.
Yes.
That's the first thing. And then there are lots of changes.
Button actually.
Exactly. Similarly, their laptop, it has a lot of things which are different. As an example, just tell you, I think it has red, yellow, and green buttons on the top, whereas we who have used the Microsoft operating system, Windows, they're used to that cross, underline, and box. I mean, it is so common for us now, we don't even think where it is. Our mouse and our hand quickly gets there and we use it. So if now you were asked that you would change, as an organization, if you are heading that function or you are heading that project, what would your first thought be? Okay, this has to happen, all right. You know the benefits, for instance. As an example, MacBooks are much better as far as graphic designing is concerned or videos are concerned, right? Number one, she's using a different system which she loves. And in case Apple is listening, you know where to give that giveaway. And she's also told a lot of benefits, which is one of the pivotal cases in change management, bringing along test cases who will motivate everybody else to the benefits. Remember when we spoke about change agents? So as an example, if she's part of a company that I'm in and we're doing this, I would definitely bring her into every meeting. And when she talks, I mean, it's natural, right? She enjoys it. There's nothing fake about it. I haven't asked her to do this. She's doing it. So you identify people like that for your purpose within the organization and they become your auto ambassadors. No training required. But you need to identify them. Second, the company's culture. She enjoyed using a system. She likes it. She's comfortable on that. And the company said, that's not our culture. So now she had to adjust. So this is a different kind of change. For the organization, their perspective in that change is harmonizing all the employees on one system. They don't want anybody to feel, is she special? Why she's using that, white glowing laptop and really skinny flat screen laptop, right? And we're using these black laptops. But the second thing, for her, it might have been negative change because she's using something which she feels is better, and now she's coming to something which she thinks or feels is inferior, right? So in that case, if that's one odd case, again, as a change agent, one could have approached her in a more delicate manner and kind of kept her feelings intact, but at the same time, moved her to that. So having said that, I'm going to move away from Apple back to budgets. Action plan. Anybody ever made an action plan? All right, so we're going to pick somebody. Who wants to volunteer before I pick? Yes, all right. I need you to make me a 5-point action plan on brushing your teeth. 5 points. And count them like this.
Get out of your bed.
No, I didn't say anything about that. All I said is action plan on brushing your teeth. Focus. Scope. First of all, so when I said brushing your teeth, I have defined a scope, which means brushing your teeth. It has nothing to do with procurement of the brush or the toothpaste. Scope is defined,
Yes.
right? Number 2, there was a point from this side.
Yes, I was there.
You were saying?
What's the scope of it? Like, what if I brush my teeth? How would that be? That would be resulting in a good manner.
That's later on. But first of all, 5-step action plan. And 5-step means I'm limiting you to 5 points. So consider these 5 points your budget. If I were to say you need to do this and your budget is 100 rupees, can you do something which is 200 rupees and they say it's just 100 more? Can't.
To be limited.
It has to be limited. So if it's 5 points, that means you quickly need to brainstorm, make an action plan in 5 points. As an example, I'll give you the first one. Pick up the brush. Second,
Applying the toothpaste or
open the toothpaste, apply the toothpaste, start brushing, wonderful,
wash your mouth.
and wash your mouth, wonderful. So 5 points, we have an action plan on brushing our teeth. When we were talking about funding and budgeting, these are the kind of things that happen when you're looking at organizations. As an example, a lot of new businesses that are designing buildings, they're looking at economical ways of lighting. So they have these skylights and special panes. So like during the day, they would have very nominal amount of light, but most of it is reflected from the sunlight and that kind of stuff. And this is all change. I know some people who hate that. But what we would do in that case is have them get a table lamp on top of their table. So at the end of the day, the overall effectiveness of the objective is met, and the individual also is somewhat happy, right? But one thing I've learned is you can't make everybody happy all the time. And this takes us back to the point of measurement. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of your change? Overall, yes, after 6 months, 1 year, that's a different story. How do you do it while you are making that change? It's not very difficult. Focus on the smaller aspects. As an example, we started earlier with a lot of people are resigning. So you've got an attrition problem. You identify the problem, all right, but the real problem is not attrition. The real problem is why the attrition is happening. So what do? Mostly what we do, as for everybody, we conduct exit interviews. And then we start formulating data from exit interviews. An interesting thing, by the way, I don't know if your experience is different, and if it is, please welcome to share. I've seen a lot of people during exit interviews. So somebody has worked for 10 years with a company. And 10 years, all cool, all benefits, everything, and promotions and everything. One fine day, the person resigns. And he tells you that, I've got an offer which is, let's say, 80% more than what I'm making right now. Cool, very good. But then addendum to that point, he's going to tell you, my manager is bad, the benefits are bad, I was never trained. You know what? My parking sucks. I once in the 10 years had a scratch on my car and you guys never fixed it. And then he'll go. Then you have another person, something a little different. But the first point is money. Or the last point is money. And the first point is, last year you did not give me the increment that I wanted. Yeah, this year you did, but last year you didn't.
Could be the least one maybe you have given me, or this was not I was expecting to have it.
Exactly. This is what an HR person would say. The inside of me wants to say that, but you can't always, right? But see, the interesting point is that when we do exit interviews, we build trends. We don't go at face value. And we learned this a long time ago in our careers. When you're dealing with people, not face value. Look at trends. And when you look at trends, trends don't lie. People do, unfortunately. I remember, and I'll share this incident before we go forward because I have tomorrow also to cover and we've got 15 more minutes. Early on in my career, I remember this guy, and mashallah, he was older than me, young man. He comes into my office, sits down, and he starts off with that, you know what, my boss, my manager is not allowing me to take leave, and I have to take leave. I'm like, okay, well, what did your manager say? And then he starts with the whole story about, you know what, I'm married by my own choice. My parents have deserted me. And then he starts sobbing and crying. And then he says, you know, my wife has had 3 miscarriages and this is a precious pregnancy. And my khala who lives in like Gujranwala, and she's the only one who's accepted to take care of my wife. And I want to take my wife to her in Gujranwala. And that's why I need, you know, all these vacation days, like almost a month. You know, when you see a young chap, mashallah, sit in front of you and cry, being human, after all. I mean, I was not as much HR back then, I was more human, so I was less HR. So I was like, oh my God, yeah, why not? I called up the manager and I said, bro, ye kya ho raha hai? Why don't you? He told me, he said, bahut bada dramebaz hai. I'm like, no, dude, nobody can lie about their wife and future kid like that. It's just not happening. And ultimately, the manager gave in and said, "Chalo, sab jo dil karta kar le." Then what happened?
He was actually lying.
Yes. The guy had a job opportunity in Dubai. He went there, and when he went there, he saw, "Achhi job hai, so I'm all settled and good." Then he sent his resignation back to Pakistan. He just wanted to make sure that if he went there and was not able to settle, he had a secure job back here, so he wouldn't lose this. And that's all there was. The point is, there is always a perspective, right? As an example, when I conduct an interview, I'm looking at the person from a different perspective. When I'm being interviewed, it's an absolutely different perspective. If I'm thinking of as a company, as an HR professional, it's wrong. Why? Because while you're trying to play this out, I could have filled the position with somebody else who deserved it, number one. Number two, the opportunity cost that I as a company suffered by having that place vacant for you in the hopes that you're coming back because of that disaster after 1 month, I could have had somebody there producing results and adding to the bottom line, right? But when I look from the perspective of that person, yes, he's trying to ensure that he has job security and he has it on both ends and so on. So it really depends on what perspective you're looking at. That's why in a lot of things, I like to say that there's no fixed or absolute right or wrong. It just depends which side of the table you're looking at it from. We forgot about this. What is this? Without naming any prime minister or any party, I'd like to make a few points clear about communication. Number one, your communication could be the best in the world, but if your audience speaks French and you speak English, it's useless.
Yeah, exactly.
If you talk about a certain political figure, which I'm not going to name, who has amazing English, and he's unable to communicate with the average Joe in Pakistan, which constitutes, see, you people are, mashallah, the privileged class of this country. People who are educated, people who have really good social circles, people who have good jobs, people who have an influence. 95% of this country are people who are not this fortunate. Some of them might be educated and not have the social influence. Some of them might have the social influence and lack education, and so on and so forth. The only criteria then for a prime minister or a political figure that if he speaks great English, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that, right? On the other hand, if that communication appeals to the general masses, and why I use the word appeal in capital and with so much emphasis is because that is what sells. As an example, a certain person whom I will not name, a prime minister, the gentleman campaigned for 10 years in the same market, in the same English, being a nice school person. Nobody gave him one worth of vote. Yes, people would donate to his causes and this and that, but they would not vote for him, enough for him to win. The moment he flipped and he became exactly what he was contesting. And why I say that, I was one of, I have my picture still on Facebook. I really like it. This was back in, when we won the World Cup. My dad was in Saudi, I was there. So as a kid, all suited up. So I went and gave a check towards Shaukat Khanum to Imran Khan, and I shook his hand. And again, that was a dream of every kid at that age. And that's a very cherished picture, and I got his autograph, and I've still got it. And then when he announced the party, I was like, oh, yes, that's it. This guy is going to change everything, right? But the whole dynamics worked in a way that at one stage, in the beginning, he used to say certain things such as, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this. And that is what I supported from the, my core values were that. The day he abandoned those core values and he went with what everybody else was doing, somehow he managed to get all the votes. So what does that tell us about us? And again, I'm not talking about the handful of people here. I'm talking about the masses. So in that circumstances, a person who is probably not a good communicator in some of the terms that we evaluate, as long as that person clicks with the masses, he's got amazing communication. So, again, coming back to this, the communication needs to be effective and it needs to transcend to the individual, which means...
To be more clear even.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. I remember training once that was done at Pearl Continental, and they were trying to do a training on cleanliness and quality, health, safety, and that kind of stuff. normally when we do that kind of training, we have a lot of words and text and this policy, this rule, that bylaw, and all that. When we arranged that training for the junior staff, people who were not really educated, but they were part of the team, what did we do? Pictures. Pictures demonstrating what we meant to say, and then we would talk to them. And that had a positive impact with them. And that communicated what we wanted to tell them, and that also had the impact that we wanted. Yeah, so you look at communication according to what you're targeting. So we're done with management. So what is this? Your communication plan. Number one, how are you going to execute it? Verbally, pictures, videos, auto ambassadors, Siemens, Apple, you know. How are you going to do it? How will you execute it? Identify exactly what we were talking about. Identify your target audience. Identify the means that you want to use. And then identify the most effective means of communicating to that particular audience. As an example, if you look around you, people respond to different things. There are some people who respond to statistics. So as an example, if she's a statistics person, if I were to go and tell her, you know what, this is really good. This is amazing stuff. In case of Apple, really lightweight, really cool. It's going to be meaningless to her. But if I were to come and tell her, you know, this is 40% lighter than the other laptop. This is 80%, it gives 80% more battery time. It gives 90% more reliability. She's better to adopt it, right? So usually when you work in a company, you know what kind of people you're dealing with. Usually, and I hate to stereotype, but stereotyping sometimes helps. And usually when you look in a company, you can stereotype people into what category they fall in. Are these people more people who follow stories and anecdotes? Are these people who want stats, figures? Are these people who want facts? Are these people who want emotional attachment to things? There are people in a company too who are just emotionally attached. They have no other reason. They're just emotionally attached to something as simple as the stapler on their table. मैं इस पे last point कहूँगा, आपकी बात बिल्कुल बजाय. I usually like to think about it in a different way. We all have the ability to do wrong. We all do. As human beings, we have the absolute capability to do wrong. And what makes us human is not doing it. And yes, there's that constant struggle of not doing it. But coming back to your point, emotions is what makes us human. We cannot be good professionals or people if we ignore emotions.
Yes.
It's very easy for a company. I mean, they wouldn't even need professionals. You'd just have like one notice board which places in the morning, today everybody will wear white. Today everybody will wear black. Today you're fired.
Yes. And you are fired.
You know, we just hired somebody off the street. Today, all of your laptops are gone and Apple is in, or vice versa, with no consideration of how people feel. But see, this might have been true 80, 90 years ago. But today's generation, fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know. But today's generation is influenced by the global market. Our child who graduates here now wants the same kind of benefits and emotional benefits, not just the tangible benefits, but emotional benefits that the Western countries are already affording. We may not have the infrastructure on a national level to do that, but as a company, as a group of individuals, as a group of friends, as a group of colleagues, we all aim to provide that for those people. And the reason is, if we don't, they're just going to start getting disgruntled. They'll not be happy because now they're exposed to it. See, once upon a time, they didn't know what was happening in another country. See, sometimes when I look at pictures, you know, it's so amazing. While we were having the war for independence and everything here, there were like cool parties going on in the US. You know, while the US was going through their war of independence, you know, we probably have the Mughals ruling over here. Nobody knew about each other. But today, the kid who's here, he's looking at videos that somebody made in India or Belgium or New Zealand. He's looking at reviews from students from around the world. He's looking at reviews from employees from around the world from different companies. And everybody wants that. I have seen people come to me, give me examples of Google. This happens at Google, why don't you do it? And the answer, I am not Google, is no longer acceptable.
Yes.
And this is the change we're going through. So guys, thank you very much. We shall continue tomorrow from exactly this place. So kind of you. I am honestly very humbled, and I hope that,